Coming up now on Animal Outtakes, we're taking a closer look at one of our favorite animals, the manatee. It's a gentle marine mammal whose health and survival is threatened by a number of impacts. From boat strikes to the lack of food, we talk with experts about what's being done to save these animals. And we go behind the scenes at ZooTampa to see how they're caring for some of the orphaned manatee babies. This and much more straight ahead on Animal Outtakes. The manatee, it's a mammal well known for its gentle nature, and they're said to be good indicators of an ecosystem's health. It's a listed species under the Federal Endangered Species Act and the State Imperiled Species List. And right now, it's not looking good for certain areas in Florida. The manatees here in the Sunshine State face many threats, from boat strikes and cold stress to red tide and entanglement. The list seems endless, and one of the more pressing issues today, the loss of seagrass in areas like the Indian River Lagoon. A group effort is underway to rescue, rehabilitate, release, and monitor sick and injured manatees. It's called the Manatee Rescue and Rehabilitation Partnership, and it's been around since about 2011.
We're all working together. That's the nice thing about this and this partnership, to make sure that we're utilizing resources very effectively and looking really out for the best interest of the animals under our care.
It works as a cooperative of organizations with a mission to inspire and advance manatee conservation through partnership. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission has experts from 5 coastal field stations who retrieve and examine reported carcasses to determine the cause of death. Through this work, FWC provides information to wildlife resource managers and the public about threats facing Florida manatees. Their latest statistics show that 1,101 manatees died in Florida in 2021. Researchers are calling it an unusual mortality event, and it's happening on Florida's Atlantic coast. The Indian River Lagoon stretches for 156 miles along Florida's east central coast. Over many decades, the Indian River Lagoon has suffered a series of harmful algal blooms, leading to massive losses in seagrass coverage, which researchers believe has led to more manatees dying from starvation. Now we head to Chiefland, Florida to talk with a biologist from Save the Manatee Club. It's a nonprofit established in 1981 whose mission is to protect manatees and their aquatic habitat for future generations. Today we're here at the Manatee Springs State Park in Chiefland, Florida, just a magnificent area. And you're the manatee biologist here, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and springs. Tell us about a spring.
So a spring is an area where water comes out of the Floridian aquifer up, and it fills out an area like this one. You can see on the springs that there's water on the top actually, and this is where the water is coming up from the boil of the spring. And these areas are typically always the same temperature all throughout the state, around 70 degrees. And manatees typically come to these areas because the water is consistently warm. Manatees don't have a lot of body fat, so they're not able to stay warm by themselves. They need to go to these warm areas in order to survive the winter. So that's why a lot of these springs are hot spots for manatees.
Now, where do the manatees come from here to the springs? Are they coming from all over our Florida waters, or just a certain area to get in here?
So manatees actually have several different regions, we consider them to be. So there's the St. Johns River region, the Atlantic coast, the West Coast, and the manatees in these areas tend to go to the same places every winter and spread out within the same area.
Now, They are threatened at this point, correct? That is the correct category. Now, why aren't they listed endangered?
Manatees were endangered up until 2017 when they were downlisted to threatened. And one of the reasons they were downlisted is because there were these groups lobbying to downlist manatees from endangered to threatened. Mostly because manatees, their habitat overlaps with boaters. And a lot of boaters feel that it impacts their rights on the water when they have to go different speeds to protect manatees. And because manatees, when they were originally listed, there were around 1,000 of them. Now there were around 6,000 to 8,000. Many people felt that manatees no longer needed to be listed as endangered because there were so many. However, the reason manatees were listed in the first place was because of the threats they were facing. They're still threatened by boat strikes, by habitat destruction, by harassment, and none of those things have decreased in frequency. Manatees are still threatened by all of the same things when they were listed that they are now. So we feel that it was preemptive to downlist manatees in the first place because they're still threatened by all of the same things they were threatened by decades ago.
But you can still handle this, right, in the threatened category to address all of these issues, or do you have to do special things?
So animals that are threatened and endangered are supposed to get the same protections by the government. However, by downlisting manatees from endangered to threatened, they receive less funding towards protection. So we wanted them to be relisted as endangered so they could get the same amount of funding for these manatee programs across the state as they had in the past.
When do you start to see the manatees in here?
In here? Well, manatees typically enter springs during manatee season, which is November to April. It's when the air temperature tends to get colder and the waters outside of springs tends to get colder, and manatees need to come into these warm areas in order to survive the winter. So manatees are threatened here in Florida, which means that they're likely to disappear in the near future if action isn't taken. As Save the Manatee Club's manatee biologist, I help to advocate for manatee protection and the best practices, using science to determine the best management practices for manatees across the state. We reach out to our partners all over the state to do plantings or do education. We are all over the place. Any way we can get the message out that manatees need help and what we can do to help them, we are there for that.
The East Coast, they're having problems.
They are.
What specifically are they?
So in the Indian River Lagoon specifically, there has been a significant loss of seagrass over the last decade. It started in 2011 with an algae superbloom, and a superbloom is when algae grows out of control. And the reason for this is because of nutrients being put into the system. So nutrients would be nitrogen and phosphorus from fertilizers, from wastewater, things like that. And the Indian River Lagoon, because it's pretty much enclosed, doesn't have a lot of water flow. So with warm temperatures and this nutrients being put into the water in the area, the algae grows out of control. And when algae grows out of control, it blocks all of the light to seagrasses, and seagrasses need light to grow. So seagrasses begin to die, and then when the algae dies, it uses all of the oxygen in the water, and other animals start to die as well, such as fish and other things. That's what causes these huge fish die-offs in a lot of areas, are these lack of oxygen or oxygen minimum zones. In the winter, manatees really need our help because when they're at these warm water sites, they can't leave for long because it's so cold, and manatees do not have a lot of fat. They can't spend a lot of time in water that's less than 68 degrees. So in the winter, they spend time at these power plants. They'll go out to find food for a little while, and then they'll come back. What's happening now is with this huge die-off of seagrass, there's no food near the power plants. So manatees go out to try to find food, and they don't find anything. And that takes a lot of energy to leave a warm water site, go out to find food, not find any, and then come back. And that's why these animals are starting to starve. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the federal government, and the Florida state government, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, are partnering together to do a small feeding study where they're feeding animals on the East Coast, specifically animals that are most affected by the loss of seagrass in the northern Indian River Lagoon.
What about here on the West Coast?
So on the West Coast, manatees are actually doing pretty well. There is a planting project going on in Crystal River right now in Kings Bay, and there has been a huge growth of this eelgrass in the rivers. Manatees have a lot of food in this area, and they still face threats like boats and harassment, but they're not dealing with this huge die-off of aquatic plants like they are on the East Coast. It is estimated that there were around 8,000 animals, but we've lost over 10% of their population just in the last 2 years due to this mortality event. It is bad. There are things that people can do to help though. There are planting projects in the Indian River Lagoon right now. Many different organizations are working together to plant seagrasses and put out clams, and clams actually filter the water. Manatees play a significant role in the ecosystem of Florida. Manatees are also federally protected, so we are bound by the law to protect them. But personally, it's because a lot of us love them and they deserve to be protected.
For more information on Save the Manatee Club, you can go to their website, savethemanatee.org. Coming up after the break on Animal Outtakes, we head to ZooTampa to see some of the incredible work that they are doing to rehabilitate the sick and injured manatees. We'll be right back.
I need a vacation. Life is exhausting. I want to relax and enjoy some me time. Then Dante's Den is the perfect place for your vacay stay. Spacious air-conditioned dens, plenty of room to exercise and run, and a pool to swim in. Whether it be an overnight stay, short or long-term, Dante's Den is waiting for you. For more information, visit dantesden.org. Ah, my land shark in the water!
For 30 years, staff at ZooTampa have been caring for the critically injured, sick, and orphaned manatees. They say that the manatee is at the heart of their commitment to the conservation of Florida wildlife. We recently had the chance to go behind the scenes to see some of the work that's being done to help the younger ones who have been orphaned.
So here this morning I was feeding 4 of our orphan calves. They're all kind of at different stages of their care here with us. They came in starting in April through October. They were all found without mom, so unfortunately they would not survive in the wild on their own and had to be rescued. And once they were here with us, deemed that they needed to be bottle fed in order to thrive and survive. When they first come in, it's around the clock, every 4 hours. As they progress and become older, they wean off some of the nighttime feedings, which they're all starting to do. So they are on a milk formula, but we have a variety of different oils and fats that we add in to make sure they're really getting the nutrition they need. It's quite a process. Obviously, we're quite a bit different than their mom would be, their wild manatee mother. So we really have to teach them how to use the bottle. Once they catch on, they do really well. As you saw, they came right over. They take the bottle, they swim away once they're done and socialize with the other manatees. They actually have a pretty long stay here with us. They're all still considered critical since they are on the bottle. There's certain milestones they really need to reach. So that we're monitoring their weights really quickly. The younger one, Tober, we're still weighing every 3 days. He should be gaining about a pound a day at this stage of his life. So it's really crucial that he's meeting those milestones. They'll be on the bottle for about 9 months to a year. Once they're off the bottle, they'll still stay with us until they're about 2 years old and about 600 pounds before we release them back to the wild. You know, we all feel really lucky to get to be here to be a part of it because there aren't a lot of facilities that do what we do. We're actually one of 4 facilities that take in and rehab manatees and release them back to the wild. And unfortunately, every year we've been getting more and more cases that need our help. So we're really lucky to be here and be able to be a part of it and get those cases released back to the wild. They really have amazing healing abilities. So once they make it through our doors, you know, we feel pretty good about their chances that we can help them turn around and get them back so they can continue to live their life and hopefully add to the population.
Recently, the ZooTampa Manatee Care Team returned their first rehabilitated manatee of 2022. Chandler, a 720-pound manatee, is back in the Florida waters at the Tico Manatee Viewing Center in Apollo Beach. Last January, Chandler was brought into the David A. Strauss Jr. Manatee Critical Care Center by Florida Fish and Wildlife officials. He'd been suffering from cold stress and only weighed about 490 pounds. Chandler is considered an inexperienced juvenile due to his age and size, so they say he will benefit from the large numbers of manatees gathered at the viewing center. He will learn to migrate from this warm weather sanctuary when the temperatures rise. Since 1991, ZooTampa has successfully returned more than 280 manatees back to Florida waters. Best of luck, Chandler, and thank you to all who worked so hard to make this happen. Coming up next on Animal Outtakes, we head to the Clearwater Marine Aquarium to learn more about the ongoing efforts happening in our waters and how they say you can make a big difference too. Dr. Powell, it's so great to be here with you at the Clearwater Marine Aquarium, and we know about all of the wonderful work you did with Winter, and you're continuing to do with her legacy. But the manatees, they need your help. What are you doing for the manatees?
Yeah, as you know, manatees are in a dire situation right now. Last year, in 2021, we had over 1,000 die. I actually started working on manatees over 40 years ago, and at that time we estimated there were only 1,000 manatees in the entire state. And so their population has slowly been increasing. They're very slow to reproduce. And so when we have a situation that happened like last year, and what is going on right now, it's very, very concerning. And so we're part of it's a consortium that's called the Manatee Rescue and Rehabilitation Partnership. And we all work together, and it's coordinated among state agencies, federal agencies, and also private organizations and nonprofits like ourselves. So what we do is part of a bigger picture. And so there are different aspects of it. We are out there collecting information, basic research, to help understand what's going on with manatees and their environment. And that information is used to help make decisions, informed decisions, but we do more than that too. We're very directly involved with the rescue of manatees if they're been injured or they're starving, like what is happening on the East Coast. And then those rescued manatees are brought into where they're cared by people, these different facilities until they can be nursed back to health. And then the other thing that we're very much involved with, if you go to the hospital and you go in the emergency room and then you're taken upstairs and you're declared to be healthy and you're released from the hospital, they say, well, come back in 2 weeks so we can check up on you. Well, when we release manatees from these manatee hospitals, they're not going to come back, and we ask them to. They're gone. So we got to go find them. And so what we do is we attach satellite tags to them so we can track them wherever they go. And then what we're doing is we're doing essentially outpatient care. We're going out and checking up on them on a weekly basis sometimes, or even more, to make sure that they're doing okay. Sometimes they don't. Most times they do, but if they're not, then we'll actually go out and intervene and bring them back to provide their care. What we're seeing in Florida is our environment is changing, particularly our water quality. And what that's doing is it's driving a whole cascade of different effects in our environment, in our coastal areas. And with that, we're also seeing a dieback of seagrass here on the West Coast, but also red tide appears to be becoming more prevalent and persisting in areas where it didn't before. Like last year, here in Tampa Bay area, that's not typical for it to be here like that, and there perhaps a consequence of Piney Point or other sort of inputs of nutrients. So what's happening, with manatees is it's very unfortunate, and it's very sad that we're seeing this happen with manatees that are being impacted by these changes in the environments. But what we have to also be thinking about is, by the time manatees are affected by these things, there's a host of other species and ecological services, that's out of balance, that's sick. And so whether it's the fish we like to eat or the water we like to swim in, what's happening is it needs to be a giant wake-up call to all of us, yes, and those that can do something about it in terms of trying to reverse this trend of creating issues with our water quality. And it's a big issue all around the state.
In your professional life, and you've been studying the manatees and the dolphins for a great many years, what do you hope to accomplish in the next few years that we can save these animals?
Well, I think one of the roles that we play in this more bigger complex issue is education. And that's something we're very well known about, is being able, what we want to do is change people's lives. Everyone that comes through here, we want to be able to have them walk out this door with something changed, maybe about what they can do themselves in terms of trying to, protect these animals or protect their environment. And we have this incredible opportunity to be able to do that through our social media and through people coming to visit us. So personally, that is something that is very important to me, is that we want people to come here to see these animals, but we want to see them leave here with a change of mind, because when they get outside, that's when they can make a difference.
Obviously, we know that the humans are really a danger to the manatees, but there is something they can do, something we should be doing. What would you suggest?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Of course, because manatees are killed, each year by boats or injured, even more injured, certainly pay attention when you're out on the waterway to be looking for manatees, and if you're in a manatee zone, to slow your boats down, because that gives time for the manatee to get out of the way, and it also gives the time for the operator of the boat to see the manatees. But in terms of this bigger issue that's going on, for example, on the East Coast and on the West Coast, most of it is related to nutrients going into our waterways that are feeding these algal blooms. And so there are things that people can do. For example, reduce the amount of fertilizer, or don't use fertilizer at all, particularly during the rainy season, because guess what? Most of that just gets washed into the waterway. Exactly. And you know, making sure that trash and debris doesn't get into the water, and also, you know, make sure that when you're talking to those that can make those decisions, basically policymakers and management folks, that they are holding these companies that dump a lot of nutrients, either quote unquote accidentally or not, hold them accountable, and make sure that we have the standards in place to prevent additional nutrients going into the water that is harmful to all the animals that live there, not just manatees. As affluent as we are, you know, we are their stewards, and if we're not able to take care of these animals, then, you know, shame on us, because it's also a reflection on who we are as people. You know, I'm practically 70 years old. I'm a native Floridian, and to sort of have watched what has happened here over the course of my lifetime is, in many respects, very, very sad. But the important thing is we can do something about it.
For more information on the programs at CMA and their future plans for expanding their manatee care programs, you can go to cmaquarium.org. Stay with us. There's more animal outtakes coming up next. We hope you had fun and learned a thing or two along the way. We'll be back here again next week with even more animals and some wild adventures. Until then, thanks for watching.